Separation confirmed. Starliner is now backing away from station and starting its return to Earth. Starliner thrusters will then complete 2 short firings to gradually increase the separation speed to help the spacecraft carefully move away from the orbiting lab.
The vehicle is now about 2 meters away from the International Space Station. At the time of undocking, Starliner and the International Space Station were flying approximately 260 statute miles over central China.
Starliner will be beginning a breakout burn soon, which will take the spacecraft forward and above station. During this burn sequence, Starliner's thrusters will perform a series of 12 short firings. The entire sequence takes about 5 minutes to complete and allows Starliner to quickly break out to outside the approach ellipsoid, or AE. And about 4 minutes into the burn sequence, Starliner will exit the keep out sphere, or the KOS. And you can see those thrusters firing there on the left of your screen as Starliner backs away from space station.
And we are now just at 35 meters away from the International Space Station. We saw a good first burn.
Houston, ISS thrusters enabled.
Confirmation, all 27 jets have fired.
Houston copies, ISS thrusters enabled.
And you're seeing the light show there on your screen.
And the first 3 of the 12 firings have completed, and there's about a 100-second pause until the 4th burn.
Starliner is about 60 meters away. And flight controllers are reporting good attitude and good control.
We are standing by for the 4th of the 12 burns in the series of firings as part of the breakout burn. As a reminder, the entire sequence will take about 5 minutes to complete. About 4 minutes into the sequence, Starliner will cross what is known as the keep-out sphere. The keep-out sphere is an imaginary 200-meter sphere centered on the space station. We are 15 seconds away from the 4th burn in the series of 12.
And you just saw burn 4, which just completed. We're hearing good burn.
And the 5th burn in that sequence of 12 just completed, and it was a good burn. The 6th burn in the series of 12 was just completed, and it was a good burn. We are halfway through the series of 12, 6 more to go.
You might be able to see some of those lights on the front of Starliner, a red and a green and a white. Those indicate the different sides of Starliner, and they're used by the ISS crew to watch Starliner move away from the ISS along the undocking axis.
And we just heard good confirmation of both burns 7 and 8 completed. Starliner undocked approximately 5 minutes ago and has just a handful of short firings left in its breakout burn, and it is now about 150 meters away from the International Space Station. And we heard confirmation of a good burn 9, 3 more to go.
Burn 10, good burn.
We have one more burn to go, but they have confirmed that Starliner has crossed the Keep Out Sphere, or the KOS, which is an imaginary 200-meter sphere centered on the International Space Station that helps flight controllers here on the ground monitor the arrival and departure of visiting vehicles.
Station Houston, Space to Ground 2. Starliner has exited the Keep Out Sphere.
Copy. She's exited the Keep Out Sphere.
A reminder, this automated breakout sequence was chosen to use Starliner's forward thrusters, which have remained nominal during this flight.
And we heard confirmation that all 12 burns in this series of breakout burn firings have completed, and they were all good burns. Starliner has crossed the Keep Out Sphere. So the next milestone for Starliner's departure will be crossing the approach ellipsoid, or AE. The AE is another invisible shape monitored by the flight control team, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. Starliner is scheduled to cross the approach ellipsoid in about 10 minutes. Vehicles outside the AE have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory, which means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering capabilities. Once outside the approach ellipsoid, joint operations between Starliner Mission Control and the International Space Station Flight Control Room will conclude, and Starliner will be on a path back to Earth.
We're now taking a look from the VESTA system, which stands for Vision-Based Electro-Optical Sensor Tracking Assembly. It's a bit of a mouthful, so we like to call it VESTA. And this is a look from Starliner back at the International Space Station. The system is really the eyes of Starliner. It's able to pick up on features on the outside of station, like handrails and reflectors. You can see some of that on your screen there in the outlines. And it's the way to assess Starliner's position and attitude. It also gives the ground teams a very accurate look at Starliner's location relative to the station. So earlier we were taking a look from the station back at Starliner. Now we're looking from Starliner back at station.
We're just under 10 minutes away from the AE exit, so in the meantime, we will check back in with NASA's Rob Navius in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Rob?
Thank you, guys. Flight Dynamics has reported that Starliner is on a perfect trajectory backing away from the International Space Station and opening a rate of about 13.5 statute miles per rev At the time of the deorbit burn, at 10:17 and 13 seconds p.m. Central Time later this evening, the vehicle will be about 56 statute miles away from the International Space Station. That deorbit burn, by the way, will be a 59-second burn to slow Starliner down by 129.9 meters per second, a 4 OMAX burn. OMAX, the acronym for the Orbital Maneuvering and Attitude Control System, thrusters and jets on the Starliner spacecraft that will enable Starliner to begin to drop out of orbit for its intended southwest to northeast trajectory across the Pacific Ocean, across Baja California, and heading towards its landing at the White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico. With the forward port of Harmony now vacant, that sets the stage, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, for the start of a couple of crew rotations that are coming up. Down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, Don Pettit of NASA and Roscosmos cosmonauts Alexei Ovchinin and Ivan Wagner and their backups are in the final stages of their preparations for launch next Wednesday. Their Soyuz 2.1A booster and the Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft that they will ride to orbit, that vehicle will roll out to the launch pad in Baikonur on Sunday, and then final preparations will lead them to a launch next Wednesday at 11:23 a.m. Central Time, heading for a two-orbit, 3-hour, 10-minute journey to dock to the International Space Station's Rassvet module. Now, that forward port on Harmony that was just vacated by Starliner's departure will be the port of call for NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov, and their launch no earlier than September 24th on the SpaceX Dragon Freedom spacecraft off of Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That will be about a 30-hour transit for those two crew members to reach the International Space Station and the automated docking to the forward port of Harmony. Ultimately, Hague, Gorbanov, Butch Wilmore, and Sonny Williams will do a relocation of the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft from the forward port of Harmony to the zenith port of Harmony, opening up that forward port for the arrival of the next SpaceX cargo ship, SpaceX 31, that's scheduled for launch in October. So a lot of activities lying ahead for the space station crew. The crew aboard the International Space Station soon will begin its sleep period and an off-duty day on Saturday, while the activity shifts over to the White Flight Control Room down the hall, as they are in a shift handover right now. Flight Director Rick Henfling will be taking over shortly to supervise entry and landing operations, and the team over there will be monitoring the progress of Starliner as it moves to its deorbit position about 56 statute miles away from the International Space Station. With that, we'll turn it back to the White Ficker and Anna and Lauren.
Thank you, Rob. Starliner is now about 750 meters away from the International Space Station as it continues to make its way to the approach ellipsoid exit. Again, that approach ellipsoid exit is targeted for 5:25 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time, 6:25 and 30 seconds p.m. Eastern Time, and everything continues to proceed as planned with Starliner's departure and return back to Earth.
And you're looking live at Starliner in free drift. Engineers are telling us that the breakout burns all went well. Thrusters are all looking good. Everything is nominal as we continue up and around space station and head back to Earth.
Again, Starliner undocked just a short while ago from the International Space Station at 5:04 p.m. Central, 6:04 p.m. Eastern, as the space station and Starliner were flying approximately 260 statute miles over central China. And shortly after that physical separation, Starliner's thrusters completed 2 short firings to gradually increase the separation speed and help the spacecraft carefully move away from the orbiting laboratory as part of the separation burns. And then Starliner began the breakout burn, which was a series of 12 short firings, which allowed the spacecraft to quickly move outside the keep-out sphere, and it is now approaching the approach ellipsoid exit. And once Starliner is outside of the approach ellipsoid, the joint operations between teams here in the Starliner Mission Control and the International Space Station Flight Control Room across the hall will end, and Starliner will be back on its path to Earth.
Maneuver slows the spacecraft down from orbital velocities and allows it to start falling back to Earth in a head-down position. At the end of that deorbit burn, Starliner angles itself for re-entry.
The deorbit burn is just the first in a series of milestones we're going to be taking off tonight. To give you the full rundown, deorbit burn is scheduled for 10:17 p.m. Central. As we said, we just got the go for that a few minutes ago. It's going to be followed by the separation of the crew module from the service module at 10:20 p.m., and the crew module will then continue on its own. At 10:45 p.m., Starliner will begin to feel the effects of the Earth's atmosphere again for the first time since its ascent in June. And a few minutes later, around 10:47, the heat from Starliner's reentry will become so intense that that plasma will begin to form around the spacecraft, causing a blackout in communications with Starliner for about 4.5 minutes. Once Starliner clears that blackout period, things will begin to happen very quickly.
Yeah, so then up next at 10:56, when Starliner is about 4.3 miles above Earth, the spacecraft will be done with the forward heat shield that is at the top of the capsule that helped protect it through re-entry, and it will jettison it to make way for the parachutes that are stored underneath. And then almost immediately, those parachutes will begin to deploy. First with 2 smaller drogue parachutes that are meant to take the edge off Starliner's speed. They open up in stages over the course of about 28 seconds. And then at 10:57 p.m., when Starliner is about 6 miles up, the drogue parachutes are released and 3 main parachutes are deployed. They also open in stages over about 16 seconds, but they stay with the spacecraft all the way until touchdown. And again, we are expecting that touchdown to come at 11 p.m. Central. Just before the touchdown, however, at 10:58 p.m., Starliner also sheds its base heat shield at the bottom of the capsule to make way for the inflation of 6 landing airbags hidden underneath it, and those will cushion the vehicle as it lands in New Mexico's desert.
Team here on the ground reporting that Starliner's in a good attitude, pointing the right direction for the service module separation.
And the service module has just jettisoned, separated, and is now falling away. It will burn up during reentry over a remote part of the Pacific Ocean. And Starliner will continue on its path to New Mexico, where the landing and recovery team is waiting for touchdown. Starliner is now angling itself and its heat shield for reentry. The entry interface is coming up in just about 10 minutes. That's the hottest part of the reentry process, with Starliner's heat shield reaching about 3,000 degrees. To protect Starliner from those heat loads, the spacecraft has what's called an ablative heat shield. The outer surface of that shield heats up to a gas, which then carries the heat away from the crew module through convection. And our team calls this process a game of threes because during entry interface, the heat shield will handle those temperatures of about 3,000 degrees, but it will convert that heat to about 300 degrees with only 3 inches of ablator. And because of this protection during this hottest part of reentry, the inside of the spacecraft remains at about room temperature. When Starliner returned from its last 2 flights, the capsules landed with 2 black stripes up the sides, indicating the heat shield was ablated as intended. So we do expect to see that again today, and the team considers that a bit of a badge of honor.
With the deorbit burn complete and the service module separated, the spacecraft's heat shield is now exposed and ready to begin experiencing the atmosphere again. The Starliner is going to make some final attitude adjustments that keep that heat shield pointing at exactly the right angle.
And next up after that is entry interface, again, just coming up in a few minutes. At 400,000 feet above Earth, Starliner faces temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit from the plasma created by air friction around the spacecraft. But Starliner can handle that heat with its heat shield, which is made of an ablative material designed to keep the inside of the spacecraft at about 70 degrees.
A few minutes later, Starliner will experience an expected blackout in communications, and that will last for about 4.5 minutes. At 30,000 feet and just 11 minutes before landing, Starliner jettisons its forward heat shield, exposing the spacecraft's parachute system. Then 2 drogue chutes will deploy, increasing drag and significantly slowing down Starliner. Then 3 pilot parachutes will pull out the main chutes, allowing the spacecraft to continue its slow and steady descent for another 8,000 feet towards the landing zone.
And once the main parachutes are fully inflated, Starliner's bucket handle releases. And what that does is it just basically levels out the spacecraft ahead of touchdown. And then the base heat shield that protected Starliner through reentry will separate at about 3,000 feet, uncovering the landing airbags. Those airbags, of course, will fill with nitrogen, allowing for Starliner to land softly and safely there in the sand.
Less than 10 minutes to go now before we do get to that entry interface point, and now just 24 and a half minutes away from the landing at White Sands Space Harbor. Everything's pretty quiet in the room, which is a good sign. Things are continuing to go smoothly as Starliner begins making its way back to Earth. Seven minutes to go now until entry interface, and then that intense heating will start about 2 minutes after we do begin the interface. That'll last about 4.5 minutes, during which time we'll be in a blackout. Starliner is currently about 130 miles. 149 miles rather above the Pacific Ocean, heading northward towards the western coast of the United States, and it's touchdown in New Mexico. We're also getting reports that the WB-57 is also able to see Starliner now as it begins coming in for its landing. We've still got just about a minute left to go before Starliner comes out of its blackout period. And this is a view from the WB-57, one of NASA's aircraft that is at the landing site, has been staged and ready to pick a Starliner, or pick up the view of Starliner as it comes in, and that is what we are seeing now.
And they're filming this video from about 16,000 feet.
The WB-57 should continue to give us a view until the drogue parachutes deploy, and then we hope to pick it up with the Cessna that is also in the area.
And flight controllers here in the room are reporting that we are out of that blackout period and everything is looking good. Starliner remaining nominal as she returns to Earth.
Again, this is a view from the WB-57.
Starliner showing a beautiful streak across the sky as she returns to White Sands, New Mexico. We're about 3 minutes away from the forward heat shield jettisoning. That's the next milestone we're looking for.
Starliner is currently about 27 miles above the Earth, and the team at White Sands reporting that they have seen it. We got a tally hole from them reported remotely.
That means they are seeing Starliner from the ground there in New Mexico.
This view is coming from the Cessna that's also in the area, picking up Starliner now from its lower altitude, about 6,000 feet above, whereas the WB-57 is about 16,000 feet up. We are now just 6 minutes and 22 seconds away from landing. We should also just be a couple minutes away from the forward heat shield jettison, which will bring on the drogue parachute deploy, followed by the main parachutes.
And the strobe lights on Starliner are now on. Starliner is now over the landing site, and that strobe light will help the teams actually track Starliner on the ground because it is very dark out there.
Now about 12 miles above the landing site and just 5 minutes away from landing. Watching now for the forward heat shield jettison. That should be coming up, again making way for the parachute deployment.
All right, and that action you're seeing on your screen, forward heat shield and drogues out.
Really interesting view of this coming down from the WB-57. See those two drogue parachutes now deployed. They slow the vehicle down initially until it gets to a safe speed for the enormous main parachutes to follow. About 4 minutes to go until touchdown. Now back to a view from the Cessna aircraft in the vicinity of the landing site. Again, this is a view from a little lower than the WB-57 we were seeing.
The next thing we're going to see here is the 3 main parachutes come out, and everything will happen pretty quickly from that point on.
After those mains are out, we'll see the bottom heat shield that has been protecting Starliner through its journey through the atmosphere come off. That makes way for the landing airbags to deploy.
And there's the main parachutes there on your screen. We see 3 out, currently reefing.
And the teams at the landing recovery teams report that they heard the booms as those came out.
3 good mains fully open there. You can see Starliner in a slight tilt, so we're going to see the rotation handle move here shortly, and it will level out Starliner. But 3 good parachutes, looking great.
Just a little over 2 minutes until the expected landing time, and we heard the rotational handle has been released, so you can see that tilt evened out. Next up is the back heat shield jettison. And there it goes. That again makes way for the airbag inflation.
Nice to see that. You can see the airbags deploying there on your screen. Those airbags are filled with nitrogen as they guide Starliner safely back to the desert floor. Just a beautiful sight as Starliner makes its way to the sands of New Mexico. And flight controllers confirming 6 good airbags.
This view still coming to us from the Cessna. We've got just about a minute left to go until the expected touchdown. I'll be watching for that time for you.
Just about 15 seconds away from expected touchdown. You're seeing the ground there in your screen as we get closer. Touchdown. Starliner is back on Earth. That landing coming at 11:01 and 35 seconds Central Time, 10:01 and 31 seconds Mountain Time at White Sands Space Harbor at the U.S. Army's Missile Range in New Mexico. Our landing and recovery teams will now wait for clearance before making their way to the spacecraft.